What happens when the hunters become the hunted thousands of feet above the Triangle region? Skinwalker Ranch, Season 7, Episode 12, Hot Pursuit, is about to show us. Hey everyone, welcome back. This episode pushes the investigation into genuinely terrifying territory. What do you think they came face to face with up there? Let's find out together. There's a moment in every long-running investigation where the ground simply isn't enough anymore. Where walking fields, setting up sensors, and digging through old records stops being the only way forward, and the team has to take the search somewhere far riskier. That moment arrives tonight in Season 7, Episode 12, Hot Pursuit, and it takes this investigation to a place it's rarely gone before. Into the open sky, chasing something that doesn't want to be caught. For anyone who's followed this show closely, the Triangle region needs no introduction. It's one of the most talked about, most heavily monitored areas of this entire property, a stretch of land that's produced some of the strangest activity the team has ever documented. Lights, movement, readings that defy easy explanation. Over the years, this area has earned its reputation the hard way through repeated, unexplained encounters that keep pulling the investigation back to the exact same coordinates again and again. And tonight, the team decides it's time to stop watching the triangle from the ground and start chasing whatever's moving through the sky above it. That decision alone tells you everything about how seriously this team is taking the UAP activity connected to this region. Unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs, have become a much bigger part of the broader conversation around unexplained sightings in recent years. And this ranch has never been shy about acknowledging that its own activity fits into that larger picture. But acknowledging something from a distance is very different from actively pursuing it. Tonight, the team commits to something far more direct. They bring in a helicopter and they go up. Think about what that decision actually requires. Chasing a UAP isn't like tracking a ground-based anomaly with a sensor array that stays fixed in place. This is active, in-the-moment pursuit, happening in real time, with a moving aircraft, moving personnel, and a target that has already proven, time and again, that it doesn't behave the way anything conventional should. There's no way to fully prepare for an encounter like this because, by definition, whatever they're chasing has never been fully understood in the first place. As the helicopter lifts off, you can imagine the mix of adrenaline and uncertainty inside that cabin. This isn't a routine flyover. This is a deliberate pursuit of something that's been triggering unexplained readings and reports above one of the most notorious stretches of the entire property. The team has almost certainly gone up with some kind of plan, likely some combination of visual tracking and onboard equipment, hoping to close the distance between themselves and whatever has been generating this activity above the triangle. But plans like this rarely account for everything, especially when the subject of the chase has consistently defied prediction in the past. And that's exactly where this episode takes a turn. According to the summary, what starts as a pursuit becomes something else entirely, a terrifying encounter. Not just a sighting, not just a strange reading on a screen. An encounter direct enough and intense enough to leave a lasting impression on the team members involved. That word choice matters. This show has used plenty of language over the years to describe unusual events, strange lights, unexplained anomalies, unexpected discoveries. Terrifying is a different category entirely, and it signals that whatever happens during this chase crosses a line the team wasn't necessarily prepared to cross. Let's think for a moment about what makes an aerial encounter fundamentally more intense than a ground-based one. When you're on the ground, there's a sense of stability, of control. You can retreat, you can reposition, you can put distance between yourself and whatever you're observing relatively easily. In a helicopter, thousands of feet above the ground, chasing something that may be moving unpredictably, that sense of control disappears almost entirely. You're committed to being in the air, sharing that airspace with whatever you're pursuing. And if that pursuit suddenly turns into a confrontation, there's nowhere to simply walk away to. That vulnerability is baked into the very premise of this episode, and it's part of what makes Hot Pursuit feel different from so much of what's come before it this season. It's also worth considering the emotional weight this kind of encounter carries for the team members actually experiencing it. This isn't a remote sensor picking up strange data from a safe distance. This is people in real time, face to face, or at least in close proximity, with something they can't identify, can't predict, and apparently can't fully control the outcome of. Fear, in a moment like that, isn't a dramatic embellishment added for television. It's a completely rational response to genuinely being caught in a situation that defies explanation while thousands of feet in the air. As the episode unfolds, you can expect the pacing to shift dramatically once this encounter begins. What starts as a methodical pursuit, likely built around tracking, positioning, and closing distance, almost certainly gives way to something far more chaotic and immediate once the situation turns. The Triangle region has already built a reputation for producing intense, hard-to-explain activity. And tonight, that reputation seems to catch up with the team in the most direct way possible. Not from a distance, but right in the middle of the sky they're actively flying through. There's something significant, too, about the choice to finally pursue this activity by air, rather than continuing to observe it from the ground. For as long as this investigation has existed, there's been a natural limitation built into ground-based observation. You can watch, you can record, you can theorize, but you're always reacting to something happening at a distance, often faster than you can respond to it. Taking to the air changes that dynamic entirely. Suddenly, the team isn't just observing the triangle's activity, they're actively inserting themselves into it, closing the gap between investigator and phenomenon in a way that fundamentally raises the stakes. And that raised stake is exactly what seems to define this episode. This isn't a story about data collected safely from the ground and analyzed later in a lab. This is a story about direct, immediate confrontation with something the team still doesn't fully understand, happening in real time with real risk attached. That shift in approach and the intensity that comes with it is likely a huge part of why this particular episode carries the weight it does this season. By the time the helicopter eventually returns to the ground, whatever unfolded during this pursuit will have left a mark on everyone involved. Not just as another entry in the research log, but as a genuinely unsettling personal experience. And for an investigation that spent 7 seasons documenting strange lights, odd readings, and unexplained structures, an episode built around a direct, high-stakes aerial encounter represents a real escalation in both the risk the team is willing to take and the intensity of what they're willing to chase down in pursuit of answers. Let's take a step back and think about the logistics of an operation like this, because deploying a helicopter for active pursuit isn't something this team would decide to do lightly. Aircraft time is expensive, coordination is complex, and flying anywhere near an area with a documented history of unexplained aerial activity, introduces real safety concerns that go well beyond a typical ground investigation. The fact that the team committed to this approach at all tells you something about how confident they were that the Triangle region's UAP activity was frequent enough or predictable enough to actually justify chasing it from the air. That's not a decision made on a whim. That's a decision built on a long history of prior sightings and readings from this exact area. Readings consistent enough to convince the team that an aerial pursuit had a real chance of paying off. And in a strange way, that confidence is part of what makes this episode so tense to watch unfold. The team isn't going up blind, hoping to get lucky. They're going up because the Triangle region has given them enough reason to believe something will be there. That expectation changes the entire emotional tone of the chase. This isn't a hopeful exploratory flight. It's a targeted pursuit built on pattern recognition and prior data, which means that when something does happen, it doesn't feel like an accident. It feels like exactly what the team suspected might occur, just far more intense than anyone anticipated. It's also worth thinking about how disorienting an aerial encounter can be compared to a ground-based one. On solid ground, there are fixed points of reference, a fence line, a ridge, a building. Even in total darkness, a person on the ground has some sense of where they are relative to the world around them. In a helicopter, especially during an active pursuit, that sense of orientation becomes far more fragile. Everything is moving. The aircraft is moving, the target is moving, and depending on the conditions, visibility itself may be limited. In that kind of environment, an unexpected encounter doesn't just register as strange, it registers as genuinely disorienting, which almost certainly plays a role in why the summary specifically describes this moment as terrifying rather than simply unusual or unexplained. There's a reason aerial encounters tend to hit differently than ground-based ones across the history of UAP reporting in general, not just on this ranch. Pilots and aircrew who report unexplained encounters often describe a very specific kind of unease, the realization that whatever they're observing is keeping pace with, outmaneuvering, or otherwise defying the physical limitations of their own aircraft. When you're in a helicopter, actively chasing something, and that something suddenly demonstrates behavior your own aircraft simply cannot replicate, it forces an immediate reassessment of the entire situation. You went up as the pursuer. In an instant, that dynamic can flip entirely. That shift from confident pursuit to sudden uncertainty is likely at the heart of what makes this episode land as hard as it does. The team didn't go up expecting to be frightened. They went up expecting to gather data, to close distance, to finally get a clearer picture of what's been generating activity above the triangle for so long. Whatever actually happens during this encounter apparently changes that expectation entirely, turning a data-gathering mission into something the team will likely be talking about for the rest of the season. It's also worth noting how this episode fits into the larger arc of Season 7. Earlier episodes this season have taken the investigation in some genuinely different directions, from historical homesteads to atmospheric radar experiments. Hot Pursuit continues that trend of pushing the investigation into new territory, but it does so in the most direct, high-stakes way yet. Where previous episodes have been about careful, methodical analysis, whether of old structures or radar data, this episode is about immediate, real-time confrontation. That contrast makes Hot Pursuit feel like a real turning point in the season's pacing, a shift from patient investigation to active, high-adrenaline pursuit. As you watch this one unfold, pay close attention to how the team communicates with each other once the situation escalates. In moments like this, the difference between panic and composure often comes down to how well a team can communicate clearly under pressure. And given how experienced this crew has become after 7 seasons of unpredictable encounters, it'll be worth watching how they handle a moment that, by their own account, was genuinely terrifying. One last thing worth sitting with before this breakdown wraps up. Episodes built around direct, personal encounters tend to hit differently than episodes built around data alone. A strange radar reading or an unexplained magnetic spike can be analyzed calmly, discussed rationally, revisited later with a clear head. A terrifying in-person encounter, thousands of feet in the air, doesn't work that way. It's immediate, it's visceral, and it leaves an impression on the people who lived through it that no amount of after-the-fact analysis can fully soften. That's likely why this particular episode carries such a different weight compared to some of the more methodical, research-driven episodes earlier this season. It also raises an interesting question for where this investigation goes from here. If the Triangle region is genuinely capable of producing an encounter this intense during a direct pursuit, what does that mean for how the team approaches this area going forward? Does this experience make them more determined to return and pursue answers again? Or does it introduce a new level of caution that shapes future decisions about how closely they're willing to engage with this part of the property? Those are the kinds of questions this episode leaves hanging in the air, quite literally. And they're exactly the kind of open threads that keep an investigation like this compelling season after season. Threads that will likely shape how the team approaches this part of the property in every episode that follows. So, when you sit down to watch Hot Pursuit, go in expecting a shift in tone from what you've seen so far this season. This isn't a slow burn, data-driven episode. It's fast, tense, and built around a genuine moment of fear experienced by people who have spent years around unexplained phenomena and rarely describe their reactions in those terms. When a team this seasoned uses a word like terrifying, it's worth paying very close attention to exactly what put them in that position. That's our breakdown of Season 7, Episode 12 of The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. A helicopter, a chase across the Triangle region, and an encounter the team clearly wasn't fully prepared for. If this one's got your attention, make sure you watch the full episode to see exactly how this pursuit unfolds and what the team encounters once they close in. And once you have, let us know in the comments what you think they came face to face with above that infamous stretch of the ranch. Until next time, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next breakdown.